Okay, so in this talk, I will address the work of Sheroanawë Hakihiiwë, a Venezuelan artist with a long trajectory of making art from, with, and about the Amazon. What I will read today is part of my dissertation that, as was just said, is titled Imaginaries of the Common in Contemporary Venezuela. In this extract that I will read, I argue that Yanomami philosophy allows us to examine the ecological implications of Hakihiiwë's work. I will refer specifically to a corpus of paintings and drawings that, taken together and read along with author David Kopenawa, express Hakihiiwë's understanding of ecosystems as the interaction of multiple and interconnected beings whose lives pass through what we may call Hojarasca time or litter time, a cycle of death, decomposition, and new life that we can understand as alternate to that of Amazonian agricultural capitalism. I want to acknowledge the support I received from ISLAA through the 2023 Spring Research Grant, which helped me fund my stay in Caracas last summer, where I was able to work in the archives of Aura Caracas and visit Sheroanawë's workshop. I will begin with a brief introduction of the artist, in case some of you are not familiar with him. He is originally from the community of Platanal in the Upper Orinoco. His artistic career began with the project Yanomami Cosmology Mamotima, which means the Yanomami art of making paper, started in 1992 by the Platanal community in collaboration with Mexican artist Laura Anderson Barbata. This project was primarily a paper-making and print-making project. The community received training in sustainable handmade fabrication of paper from recycled and indigenous fabrics, which they used to create limited edition collaborative books such as this one. The print-making techniques that Hakihiiwë and other members of the project employed were drawn from traditional Yanomami body painting using wooden blocks and pigments. Hakihiiwë became project director in 1994 and led the group in the creation of their first book, Shapono, 1996 to 2002. This publication highlighted the origins of Yanomami housing, made cooperatively by scholars, elders, and other members of the Platanal community. It illustrates a creation story involving Omawe and Yoawe, twin brothers who taught the Yanomami people how to build traditional communal dwellings called chaponos. Since his involvement with the paper-making project in the 1990s, Hakihiiwë has become widely known in and outside of Venezuela. His work has been shown in venues like the 2022 Venice Biennale, and recently a solo show of his work last year in the Museum of Art in Sao Paulo. So Hakihiiwë, as you can see, his visual lexicon consists primarily of patterns traditionally used for basket and body painting, passed down to him by his mother, who is a maker of baskets, fans, and other objects. Hakihiiwë has described his mother as tierra and tierra as his mother. I quote from an interview, "I feel very proud of my mother and also of my land because my mother is land." His graphic language has allowed him to expand his inherited repertoire and incorporate personal interpretations of a wide variety of local fauna, flora, and other elements of nature/home, which he sketches while on long walks around his village. He has insisted in interviews that he does not invent anything. I quote, "Everything I do is the forest and what is there." In 2018, Hakihiiwë took part in an exhibition organized by the Universidad Nacional de Colombia in Bogotá titled Conjuro de Ríos. This exhibition was curated by María Belén Sáez, Luis Romero, and Kiki Mazzucchelli. This show brought together sculpture, drawing, painting, and video and audio installation that focused on rivers and various ways of understanding and relating to them as sacred beings, as living beings with rights, language, intelligence, and the capacity to rebel, and as common goods at the core of struggles for land and subsistence. After consulting with his mother and researching around his village in the Upper Orinoco, Hakihiiwë and his collaborator and curator Luis Romero decided to produce a series of 74 drawings entitled Where I Live in My Forest and the Orinoco River, All These Animals Live Too. With the lines of traditional Yanomami graphics, Hakihiiwë traces the attributes of animals that live in the proximity of the village of Poripori, synthesizing the fauna that populates his universe. The title of the series clearly alludes to interspecies commonality based on the sharing of the river in space. Aside from Where I Live, Hakihiiwë presented a second series in Conjuro de Rios titled Dead Trees. This group of paintings portray trees that have died of non-man-made causes. They have died of natural causes. His series were 2 of 3 bodies of work in the exhibition that did not represent rivers. The third one being Carolina Caicedo's sculptural Plomo y Brea, an installation of cast nets made by fishermen of the Huila and Antioquia regions in Colombia. Hakihiiwë's drawings were displayed close to an audiovisual installation by Endemica Studios, and I regret not having images to show of the other works to contextualize better. This installation was called Relación con los procesos del agua y las represas de Colombia, featuring spectacular views of the Magdalena River. Another piece, Carolina Caicedo's Patrón Mono, was a video portrait of the Cauca River, and Clemencia Echeverry's Río por Asalto also featured moving images of the Cauca. These audiovisual pieces in the show emphasize the sheer physical force, size, and persistent movement of nature, vis-a-vis human attempts to dominate or weaken it, deploying moving images that produce feelings of wonder before a transcendent nature, while simultaneously denouncing the devastating effects of human intervention on waterways. I argue that Where I Live and Dead Trees employ an entirely different approach. Rather than representing the grandeur and scale of nature, Hakihiiwë reduces it to its most discrete elements and simplest forms, graspable enough for a few brushstrokes to encompass them, and small enough that the shapes can be repeated over and over on the same surface. This repetition both references the customary use of geometric motifs in pottery, body painting, and basket making, and hints at a distinctly Amazonian understanding of non-human beings as spirited. To support this view, I turn to the words of the Yanomami activist, philosopher, and shaman David Kopenawa for a definition, and I quote, "What they, the white people, call nature is the forest as well as the shapiri, or the spirits who live in it. The forest is both land and forest spirit, which is not one, but rather an infinity of shapiri, images, spirits, or true essences of everything that the forest encompasses, from the leaves of the trees, to the worms, to the game, to the vines." As Eduardo Viveiros de Castro, who has come up often today, explains in his analysis of Kopenawa's description of the shapiri, the determining features of these spiritual entities are tininess and innumerability. Kopenawa describes Shapiripe as an endless multitude of minuscule and powerful spirits. If notions of smallness and multiplicity don't already resonate strongly with Hakihiiwë's aesthetic, Kopenawa's account of the Shapiri's descent to the shaman's house further elucidates Hakihiiwë's gesture of filling each of the surfaces with the same symbol. I'm going to read this quote from Kopenawa cited in Viveiros de Castro. "The Shapiripe descend to us perching on mirrors, which they keep suspended a little over the soil. In a shaman's house of spirits, these mirrors are placed, propped, hung, piled, and lined up side by side. When the house is spacious, the mirrors are large, and as the number of spirits increases, the mirrors mount up one on top of the other. But the Shapiri don't mix with each other. The mirrors of the same spirits regularly succeed each one in the house. Thus there are the mirrors of warrior spirits, bird of prey spirits, cicada spirits, mirrors of thunder, lightning, and storm spirits." In light of this description, we may say that Hakihiiwë's rhythmic drawings on paper evoke the mirrors of the Shapirip, capturing or isolating a fragment of an endless number of spirits in the orderly disposition that they assume on earth. Hakihiiwë has also experimented with staging the shaman's house in the gallery space, His 2022 exhibition Pariminai, or The Eternal House of the Shaman, in Abra Caracas, featured his signature repetitive works on paper surrounding a shaman's pole in the center of the room. If the forest for Hakihiiwë is the sum of an uncountable number of spirited beings, so is the river. In Where I Live and in Dead Trees, the artist bypasses the urge to represent the river itself as caudal, or volume of water, in favor of an expansive interpretation of the riverine theme. In the context of Conjuro de Ríos, the foxes, hummingbirds, ants, catfish, hedgehogs, birds, worms, and dead trees, among many others represented in these two series, problematize what the word río can hold. In this way, Hakihiiwë envisions the river as an ecology as defined by David Kopenawa. In the forest, and I quote from Kopenawa, we human beings are the ecology, but it is equally the shapiri, the game, the trees, the rivers, the fish, the sky, the rain. In short, Hakihiiwë's river is not only the physical medium of water or a resource for the communities that need the water, but a system of human and non-human beings. Here, nature is not outsized or ungraspable. Indeed, it is not separate from the author at all, as the beings depicted are presented as neighbors. Where I live, they live as well. Therefore, the river is not a site of spectacle. While audiovisual footage of flowing water evokes circulation and force, these two series allude to a relational amalgam that is better thought of in terms of relative stability. These drawings and paintings speak of the synergy between the river and many other entities. In a text that accompanies the 2022 show Pariminai, Nora N. Mora attempts to theorize the artist's interest in diminutive animal markings as an expression of animal-human relationships within Yanomami cosmology. Describing the series Ayatu Oni, which consists of painted caterpillar markings, Mora proposes that Hakihiiwë, I quote from Mora, collaborates in a collective writing, or a collective graphia, with the caterpillar that defies the animal-human binarism. By imitating the caterpillar's trace, she argues, Hakihiiwë questions who, quien o quienes, is painting. This argument, inspired by the concept of Amerindian perspectivism, which already was much better explained than I can explain it, references the continuity between humans and other species espoused by Amazonian cosmologies. To be more precise, Viveiros de Castro argues that such cosmologies conceive of a generic soul possessed by humans and non-humans whose dissimilarity is one of embodied perspective. In short, spiritual unity and corporal diversity. The notion that human and non-human beings share a common essence is constitutive of Yanomami religious thought. In his famous book, The Falling Sky, David Kopenawa explains that the Yanomami traditionally believed the forest was, in the beginning of time, populated by humans with animal names. These ancestors gradually became game animals, and the humans that came after them began to hunt and eat them. Kopenawa emphasizes, and I quote from him again, the tapirs, the peccaries, and the macas that we hunt in the forest were also once human. This is why today we are still the same kind as those to whom we give the name of game. Following Viveiros de Castro and Kopenawa, we may argue that Yanomami cosmology presumes a background molecular humanity in the non-human, a remnant of, in Viveiros de Castro's words, mythic times in which all beings were indiscernible from each other. Following Kopenawa's descriptions of Yanomami society and thought, we may ask if the molecular humanity that non-human and human beings share influences an ethics of measure and boundaries that seek to preserve ecological balance. For example, in regards to traditional practices of clearing the forests for agriculture, Kopenawa explains that Yanomami communities heed the orders of the Creator to open gardens without making them go too far, a directive that explicitly forecloses the possibility of indiscriminate growth and requires attunement to the forest as both a spiritual and material ecosystem so as to know how much of it can be cleared. Hakihiiwë, on the other hand, has often spoken about his relationship to the forest. In a 2022 conversation with his friend and collaborator, Luis Romero, he described it in terms of measure, care, and reciprocity. So I will quote a little sentence from a much longer paragraph. We respect the forest, we don't take more than we need, everything has a use and a reason. Measure and restraint are key dictates of Yanomami land use, which is shallow, as digging and burning are thought to render the earth dry and hot, arid and unusable. A perpetual self-regenerating damp layer of leaf litter constitutes what Copenhagen calls the value of growth of the land, the source of its richness. Hence, by emphasizing the cause of death of trees as non-man-made, Hakihiiwë's Dead Trees comments on the continuity of this value of growth through natural decay, and at the same time on the impact of deforestation in the region on the eruption of agribusiness and mining into the cycle of death and birth. As a result, the artist conceives the soil as simultaneously a resource held in common and a vital, as in endowed with vitality, participant, as the sum of infinite soulful beings in the forest ecology. I wish to highlight that the litter layer, in Spanish hojarasca, is a powerful symbol of resistance to monoculture and abrasive agriculture not unique to indigenous societies in the Amazon. In her book, Vital Decomposition, Soil Practitioners and Life Politics, anthropologist Christina Lyons writes about the regenerative agricultural practices of peasants of the Colombian Putumayo, many ex-coca growers disappointed with the USAID alternatives, particularly focusing on an experimental farm school named La Hojarasca. In her conversations with the teachers and learners of the school, Lyons identifies a process of Amazonización that involves becoming reacquainted with the rhythms and cycles of the weather, microbial and insect behavior, and particular soil compositions. Throughout her book, she offers hojarasca, or litter layer, as both the signifier of recovery or re-Amazonización of the soils and as a metaphor for ever-unfolding community generation. To quote from Lyons, La Hojarasca is bundles of life pulsating away, dense entanglements of plants decomposing leaves and rootlets, the buzz of insects, sounds of small animals and birds, cloaked by selva canopy and human activity, all of which allows the farm to carve out a transformative space for itself. In Lyons' case study, the litter layer is both the neroperi, or the value of growth of the soil, and an expansive common that includes microorganisms, insects, birds, and humans. Taken together, the works by Sheroanawë Hakihiiwë that I have discussed in this presentation characterize the multiplicity of entities that exist in forests or rivers and which can hold all sorts of interdependent relationships. Hence, I propose that relational paradigms are ecological paradigms. To quote Maria Puig de la Bella Casa, they are attentive to the capacity of relation creation, to how different beings affect each other, to what they do to each other, the internal poiesis of a particular configuration. Thank you.